What if I told you the government shutdown battle playing out in Washington right now looks almost exactly like a mirror image of the past? The party that once demanded a clean stopgap is now the one loading it with demands. The party that once warned against political hostage-taking is now the one using the threat of shutdown as leverage. It's a political role reversal that even seasoned lawmakers are calling bizarre, and it could have major consequences for the country as the October 1st deadline approaches. For years, Republicans were the ones who pushed Washington to the brink. In 2013, conservative hardliners led by Senator Ted Cruz drove the government into a 17-day shutdown over their attempt to defund the Affordable Care Act. Democrats back then refused to negotiate, insisting on a clean spending bill. They argued that keeping the lights on in government should never come with policy strings attached. Republicans lost that fight, and many vowed not to repeat the same mistake. But today, the tables have turned. This time, Republicans are united behind a short-term, clean continuing resolution, a 7-week punt designed to keep agencies funded while negotiations continue. Democrats, on the other hand, have written their own version of a stopgap that lasts just 4 weeks but includes a shopping list of policy priorities, extending enhanced health insurance subsidies, reversing elements of Republican health care legislation, and blocking the Trump administration's budget director from withholding funds Congress already approved. Suddenly, the minority party is the one insisting on policy riders. And here's where it gets even stranger. Some of the Republicans who once despised temporary funding bills, the very members of the Freedom Caucus who champion shutdowns as leverage, are now supporting their leadership's clean resolution. Meanwhile, Democrats who represent federal workers, the very people hit hardest by furloughs, are standing firm against it. One Republican congressman, Rich McCormick of Georgia, put it bluntly, "My brain's falling out of my head," he said, stunned by how upside down the politics have become. Now pause for a moment and think about that. We are witnessing a near-perfect inversion of the shutdown fights of the last decade. Republicans, once spoiling for a brawl, are now trying to play the role of pragmatists. Democrats, once the party of stability, are digging in even if it risks a shutdown. That's not just a shift in strategy, it's a complete transformation of incentives. And the biggest reason for that transformation, Donald Trump. The former president has made it clear he wants Republicans united. He has publicly endorsed both GOP stopgaps this year. His budget director, Russell Vought, has been cheered by conservatives for refusing to spend money they disagree with. That means Republicans are sticking together, following Trump's line, and trying to present themselves as the reasonable actors. Democrats, meanwhile, are furious, arguing that Trump is strong-arming his party into refusing meaningful negotiations. 1-minute check-in, let's sharpen the hook here. Imagine telling voters that the Freedom Caucus now supports a short-term funding bill, while Democrats are the ones threatening a shutdown. That is the Twilight Zone moment unfolding in Congress, and lawmakers themselves are admitting they can hardly believe it. Take Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio. For years, he pushed aggressively for shutdowns to force spending cuts. Today, he's on record urging colleagues to send Chuck Schumer a clean CR. That is not a typo. That is not satire. That is the new reality of congressional politics. Even Scott Perry, former Freedom Caucus chair, has backed the strategy. Speaker Mike Johnson, who once vowed never to rely on continuing resolutions, has now pushed through 2 of them in 2025 alone. But Democrats insist their position is justified. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer told reporters, "What's different? They were taking something away. We're trying to restore something that they took away." In other words, Democrats argue that pushing for insurance subsidies is not the same as Republicans once trying to rip away Obamacare. They believe they're fighting for positive gains, not destructive cuts. Republicans, however, see blatant hypocrisy. House Appropriations Chair Tom Cole reminded reporters that in 2013, Democrats insisted stopgaps must be clean. That was the wrong thing to do then. You are doing the same thing now, Cole said. Republicans believe voters will remember who is demanding more than just keeping the government open, and that it will be Democrats who bear the blame this time around. And that brings us to the critical question, who will voters blame if the lights go out in Washington? History suggests the party making the demands often takes the hit. That's why Republicans are sounding so confident. Senator John Thune put it plainly, When you're the ones who are trying to have a bunch of new stuff, generally, you're the ones who end up getting blamed when there's a shutdown. 2 minutes in, let's add another engagement point. Consider this. In past shutdowns, Democrats had a secret weapon: geography. Their lawmakers represented many federal workers, people who live and breathe the pain of furloughs, that used to restrain Democratic leaders from playing hardball. But this time, even those members are all in. They're openly declaring they will stand firm, no matter what. Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland, whose district is filled with federal employees, said, "Everything they're doing is designed to protect their dismantling of Medicaid and the healthcare system, and we made a very emphatic statement that we are going to stand strong." So the question is no longer whether Democrats will blink. The question is how long they can hold their line once constituents start calling, once agencies close, once paychecks stop. Republicans are betting that when senators like Mark Warner of Virginia, who is up for re-election next year, hear from angry voters, their resolve will crack. Warner, though, insists he's ready for the fight, pointing to millions of Americans who could lose health insurance if subsidies expire. He frames the battle not as political gamesmanship, but as a moral stand against a sicker nation. 3 minutes in, let's raise the tension. Donald Trump is also playing his part loudly from the sidelines. He has told Republican leaders not to bother dealing with Democrats. He has predicted that the country could very well end up closed for a period of time. He has mocked the idea of bipartisan negotiation, saying any meeting with Democrats won't matter. That kind of rhetoric only stiffens Republican resolve and fuels Democratic outrage. In fact, Democrats directly accused Trump of instructing Republicans to ignore them entirely. Representative Benny Thompson of Mississippi said it plainly. Donald Trump told them, "Don't talk to the Democrats." And so they didn't. This power struggle burst into open view on the Senate floor last week, when Schumer and Republican leader John Barrasso clashed. Barrasso accused Schumer of taking funding hostage. Schumer fired back that Republicans had refused to engage with Democrats at all. It was a rare, raw exchange that underscored just how high the stakes have become. So where does this leave us? The government faces a shutdown on October 1st. There is no clear off-ramp. Republicans believe they are positioned to win the blame game this time, while Democrats are convinced they are fighting for the right cause. Both sides have hardened, and the usual group of moderates urging compromise is smaller and quieter than ever. 4 minutes in, here's another hook to keep us focused. Think about how unusual this alignment is. Republicans are trying to look like the adults in the room, pushing for a clean CR. Democrats are embracing the risk of shutdown, normally a political third rail. And the glue holding Republicans together? Donald Trump. If his support were to waver, if he suddenly decided chaos looked better than unity, the entire strategy could collapse overnight. But for now, Trump is the enforcer, and Democrats are the disruptors. It is exactly the opposite of 2013. The inversion is so complete that lawmakers themselves call it the Twilight Zone. When the Freedom Caucus and Jim Jordan are pleading for a short-term funding bill, you know we've crossed into political territory that few could have imagined a decade ago. As the Rosh Hashanah recess looms, Republicans hope time back home will pressure Democrats to relent. Democrats believe health care is too potent an issue to surrender on. Federal workers brace for uncertainty, markets grow uneasy, and agencies are already drawing up contingency plans. The real-world consequences are mounting while the standoff drags on. 5 minutes in, let's land our final hook. Picture this. In 2013, Republicans walked into a shutdown demanding Obamacare's repeal and walked out 17 days later with nothing to show for it but political damage. Today, Democrats are trying the same gamble, but with health care benefits they say must be restored. Will history repeat itself, with the demanding party shouldering the blame? Or has the political climate shifted enough that Democrats can survive, maybe even thrive, by refusing to back down? In the end, this fight is not just about numbers on a budget line. It's about control, about precedent, about which party can credibly claim to be fighting for the people rather than against them. For Republicans, it's about proving they can govern responsibly under Trump's banner. For Democrats, it's about standing tall against cuts to Medicaid and against what they see as sabotage of America's healthcare system. Both are gambling that voters will see it their way. As the clock ticks down to October 1st, the stakes could not be higher. Federal workers face furloughs. Programs millions of Americans rely on hang in the balance. And the nation watches as Congress once again tests just how far each side is willing to go. The question is simple: who blinks first and who pays the political price?